Alright guys, it's round 2 of tonight's Friday Night Magic standard event from Lost Legion Games and Comics in South Charleston, West Virginia. 93 of you watching live, many more of you watching after the fact on YouTube and Twitch. We appreciate your patronage. Let's get into the action. On the right, it is streamer regular Jonathan Wright. He was in here after round 1. We talked a little bit about his deck. He is an Esper control pilot usually, but this week he has built a green-black mid-range deck, often known as the Rock. It's everything you would expect out of a green-black deck. Tries to cast an Underworld Connections before realizing he does not have the mana to do so. But it is a lot of value control cards, Abrupt Decays, Connections like you saw. Sylvan Caryatid's Coursers, and his high end is Reaper of the Wilds and Primeval Bounty. So he's going to shock himself to cast a Reaper of the Wilds, sending it out without hexproof protection. Knowing that Casey Skibbe, his opponent, is playing a Naya Super Friends deck, does not have a lot of removal spells in his list. 2 Mizzium Mortars, usually all he has in his list. I believe he's borrowing this deck from fellow stream regular Alec Myers. So Casey lands a Xenagos the Reveler, makes a Satyr lose it back on chump block duty to keep the Xenagos around through a Reaper attack. Jonathan correctly remembers the Scry trigger there. Then fires off a Sylvan Caryatid of his own. Casey going to Scry with a Temple of Abandon here. This Naya Super Friends deck, very good. You've seen it over multiple weeks as Alec Myers wins every match of Magic he ever plays with it. Stormbreath Dragon showing up, just one of many haymakers in this list. So there's a Reaper serving in again, chumped out by the Satyr. Jonathan scrying that card to the top. Let's see what his follow-up is here. And there is Primeval Bounty. We'll go ahead and bring that up on the card viewer. It's a whole lot of value in one card. Make a beast, put some counters on creature, gain some life. Very difficult card to get rid of in this format, at least in game 1. And just makes everything you do for the rest of the game incredibly relevant. So Casey's going to use this opportunity to monstrous his Storm Breath. Jonathan going to take 2 off the Stormseeker effect, and then drop down to 5 off an attack. So Jonathan needs to find some removal here for the Storm Breath. He's got plenty of it in the form of Hero's Downfall and Ultimate Price. If he plays a land here, he can also gain 3 life, go up to 8. That'd be enough to stay out of range of the Storm Breath attack by itself if Casey can't add anything else to the board. But before anything, Jonathan's going to serve in at the Xenagos, and much like the first 2 turns, Satyr Token is going to jump in the way. Jonathan leaving that one on top, changing his mind, putting it on the bottom, casting Underworld Connections here. So it looks like we do not have answer in hand. We're looking for an answer. So casting a non-creature spell triggers Primeval Bounty. You get 3 counters to distribute onto target creature. He puts it on the Sylvan Caryatid, draws a card with connections, and then scoops him up. So he's got a lot of removal in his list, but he just couldn't find it. And the Naya deck doing what it does best, playing haymakers, winning off the back of a Stormbreath Dragon. So these guys go to the sideboard next. So we should be underway with Game 2 of our Round 2 feature match in short order. So game number 2 underway. Jonathan falling short in game 1, just could not find a removal spell for Stormbreath Dragon, and Stormbreath did what it always does, close the game out quickly. So he's trying to break even here in game 2. Scry on turn 1, Caryatid on turn 2, and no play from Casey. No Elvish Mystic, no Sylvan Caryatid, so that's going to be a good sign if you're in Jonathan's seat, as the onslaughts of never-ending threats out of the Naya deck slowed down for a couple turns. But there is a turn 2 Mystic after all, that will enable a turn 3 Domri, should he have that in his hand. Here's a Thought Seize out of Jonathan, revealing Mortar, Storm Breath, Elspeth, Xenagos, and 2 Shocklands. So what to take here? If I'm Jonathan, I consider taking the Xenagos. Storm Breath, we have multiple outs to on our deck. Elspeth is a long ways off, and we are a Hero's Downfall deck. Looks like he wants to take that Storm Breath Dragon, though. So I can't really make out Jonathan's hand here, but the fact that he's spending a lot of time thinking about this indicates that his hand probably is has a going to have difficulty dealing with all 3 of these cards in unison. And again, I can't stress enough, that's what the Naya deck does. It attacks you from multiple angles. And Jonathan does in fact take the Elspeth, so playing the long game here. Elspeth probably the best card of those 3 in terms of just raw power, but we are several turns off from it making an appearance here. Then Jonathan follows that up with a Scavenging Ooze. There's a Stomping Ground, going to shock Casey down to 18, and likely going to throw out this Xenagos here. That is in fact what we choose to do. Let's make a Satyr token. Just passes back, no point in attacking. Because of the Caryatid, we gotta keep it back on defense to protect Xenagos from that Scavenging Ooze. So there is a Reaper of the Wild with the Caryatid. We can leave Hexproof mana up. Alright, so I spaced out for a little bit as we've got one player who likes to call the judge way too much out there. And it's hard not to try and hear what he's complaining about this time. So Storm Breath comes down. Jonathan knew about that from the Thought Seize earlier. Xenagos continues to make tokens, and we pass back to Jonathan here, and he's in a ways. He's got a lot of threats that he needs to find a way of dealing with. He has 2 Mutavolts, so he can kill the Xenagos here if he wants to, but he's going to get Stone Rain twice probably in the process. He's offering up his Mutavolt here. Oh, so excellent play from Jonathan here where Hero's Downfall on the Scavenging Ooze that goes unblocked before damage. Hero's Downfall on the Storm Breath. Then eat it with his Caryatid mana to kill Xenagos. So a great turn from Jonathan there. Plays an Overgrown Tomb, taps, and then passes back. So here's a replacement Storm Breath, but Jonathan has dealt with the Planeswalker. So Casey tapped out here, representing close to lethal on board as it is with just the dragon. Let's see what Jonathan's follow-up is here. He's got a 3/3 ooze. He's got a Reaper of the Wild. He's got 2 Mutavaults, 6 mana overall if you count the Sylvan Caryatid on board. 2 cards in hand here. What we really want is an ultimate price or a Hero's Downfall. Jonathan knows about that Mizium Mortars in Casey's hand, so he's getting very close to getting blown out there. There's a Downfall on the dragon. I'm going to scry with our Reaper. Likely eat that with your ooze and then load up a Mutavault and attack in for 10. Seems like a good line of play here. Just get the race on. Especially since Casey is 1 untapped mana away from overloading mortars. Yep. Charleston choosing not to activate his Caryatid. So Casey goes down to 7. Jonathan at 9. Mortars on the Scavenging Ooze. I guess overloading is not really that good, because it won't allow you to play a Pelucranos, which seems very good at this point, and only really gets rid of the Caryatid, as the Reaper is conveniently 4/5. So Reaper serves in. Looks like shenanigans here, as Casey deciding if he wants to offer up his Pelucranos in defense. Instead he goes with the Satyr token. It hits the bin, so Johnson's going to scry off the Reaper's ability here. And now considering what he wants to do with that card in question. He's got a real thinker here. He decides to leave it on top. I'd be very curious to see what that card is. Plays a Lifebane Zombie. Gets another Pelucranos. Not nearly as good as it would otherwise be because of the legendary status, but then another Ooze, and he's got mana up to use it. He's got mana up to leave up Hexproof as well. And in case he just passes the turn back, end of turn, eat your dragon, gain a life, make a 3/3 Ooze. Now Jonathan should be in the driver's seat. This was the card he left on top after thinking for a month of Sunday, so I'd be very curious to see what it is. We still need to get through that Pelucranos. Still need to find a way through. So the Lifebane Zombie down at the bottom is a guaranteed 3. We need to get 4 damage home beyond that. So monstrous Pelucranos for 1. Can't block the Reaper because of Death Touch. I guess it's not so much shenanigans when it's printed right on the card. So Casey is going to jump out. And there's a Lifebane Zombie. So Lifebane Zombie was the card he left on top. I guess debating it because he didn't want to get blown out by a Pelucranos monstrous, but Casey forced to do that before Jonathan can play the redundant copy. So another 3 damage with evasion in the turn. Johnson's going to continue to eat away at the graveyards with a Scavenging Ooze. Going up to 12, making a 5/5 Ooze. Draws a fresh card off the top. Are we loading up Mutavaults and serving in at this point? That should be lethal, barring a trick here. We can block the Ooze with the Pelucranos, but then Well, yeah. He can load up both mutavolts. This attack is good. If Casey is empty-handed, this is good enough. So there we go. Jonathan finds a way. Elspeth. And both players keep turn 1 Elvish Mystic. That's where the Super Friends deck wants to be. Just play a Sacred Foundry tapped. Don't forget to attack with your Elvish Mystic. Loading up for another turn 3 Xenagos the Reveler. There's a Thoughtseize. Probably going to take a Xenagos the Reveler. Revealing 2 lands in Elspeth and the Mortars to go along with the Gruul Planeswalker we've talked about ad nauseum. So Xenagos hits the bin several turns off of the Elspeth. No other business in Jonathan's hand. And he'll finish off the turn by scrying a card to the bottom with his Temple of Malady. Casey draws and adds a Sylvan Caryatid to his board, which means he'll be able to land that Elspeth next turn. So Jonathan's going to need another discard spell here, or load up a Hero's Downfall. And there's a Courser of Kruphix, revealing a land on the top, but Jonathan obviously can't take advantage of it quite yet. So shock ourselves so we can find our 6th mana for Elspeth, make 3 soldiers, and then pass back. And we'll see if Jonathan does in fact have a Hero's Downfall. There's a Thoughtseize, a couple turns too late. Jonathan falling behind here. Elspeth very good at closing games out. It's good enough on turn 10 or 12 or 20, but very tough on turn number 4. So Jonathan gains life by playing a land. There's Hero's Downfall. So crisis averted, at least in the interim. Still have 3 soldiers to deal with, but knowing Casey doesn't have a lot of backup gas. And speaking of the devil, he just draws an Johnny. So let's shock ourselves here down to 16. Play Elysium Mortars, and then clears a way for his soldiers, one of which is now a 4/4 because of a Johnny's activation. That should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 coming at Jonathan. And then, in retrospect, Casey deciding to distribute those counters evenly. So Jonathan with the double Hero's Downfall draw here, but still facing down 6 power guys. Likely going to suicide with his Mutavault here. And a Xenagos off the top, so the top of Casey's deck. Serving him well. Serve in for 8 here. Jonathan's got a choice now. He can Stone Rain himself to get rid of one of these soldier tokens. He can hope he has a Ratchet Bomb in his deck so that he can draw it in one-sided Wrath here. So Jonathan decides to bite the bullet. I genuinely feel like he has no other option here. Drops down to 5 in the process. So Johnny did a lot of work here. So we're facing down 8 power of attackers, 9 power if you include the Mystic. There's a Corsair. Not a land on top. Probably the worst possible card in his deck on top. Goes up to 6 off the swamp from his hand. I guess an ultimate price could clear out one here. Casey Hellbent, he's drawn like a maniac so far this game. Let's see what's on the top this time. Make another Satyr token. And that's lethal, unless we have a removal spell. Abrupt Decay works here. Takes out a Satyr. Block one with the Courser. Go down to 2. Unfortunately for Jonathan, he knows when he's drawing off the top. It's
Connections.
It's not any good. There's a land. That's at least a step in the right direction.
And we can draw something off the connections. We can draw this other connections and then draw something else.
I would wonder if the connections might not be the kind of card you want in your deck in this matchup, but I don't know what the sideboard is. Jonathan's only built the deck today, so I'm not sure if he is fine-tuned in terms of his sideboarding strategy.